Now we really need to understand what we're getting at here. See, the evolutionists are saying that they too have a special interest in granites. They too have a special interest in El Capitan. But it's far different than what we have been saying. Their theory, David, is?
Their theory can be summarized by this slide. If you look at it, the theory of granite formation, if you go take a geology course at any public university or other university, you can see that molten rock or molten magma is theorized to exist miles and miles below the Earth's surface. Over the course of hundreds of thousands or perhaps millions of years, this molten magma cools from the outside in slowly. And in the process of cooling, it's also under great pressure. So the resultant type of rock is what geologists call an igneous rock, but in particular, these types of rocks that form so deep underground are typically, a popular example is a granite rock, such as the El Capitan. So you could say if that's really true of how granite forms, how come you see El Capitan rising above the ground as it is? Well, geologists would be quick to tell you that that's not where El Capitan formed, but it formed deep underground, cooling slowly over millions of years.
David, let me ask you a question. It says evolutionary theory of granite formation. We're going to come back to this from time to time, but that word theory, for example, we see volcanoes erupt and the lava comes out and the rocks form. There's no theory there. There's an actual experimental observation. Why does it say evolutionary theory? We need to clarify that.
It's a theory because it's difficult to take the processes that are theorized to occur deep in the earth and to put that into a laboratory. It doesn't mean that it hasn't been tried. In fact, we're going to look a little bit later at where scientists have actually tried to duplicate the conditions deep in the earth with slow cooling to try to duplicate what they feel like happened with the formation of granite rock. For instance, if you have a sedimentary rock, such as a sandstone, you can actually take the constituents of sandstone and put them together, put them in a press, and actually sort of form sandstone itself in a laboratory under conditions similar to what it's theorized to form naturally. But granite rock is a little bit different. When you go to attempt to make a granite rock using the formative processes which are theorized to cause granite rock, you actually find that you get a different type of rock, a rhyolite. And this is going to be kind of a very important part of our presentation, that man cannot reproduce what God has created. And before you just completely turn that off, let's look at some of the yet more evidences that we have that perhaps these rocks really are created rocks and not something that forms slowly over geologic time. There's a booklet, Science and Creationism. And this booklet was published by the National Academy of Sciences. Who has heard of the National Academy of Sciences? Anyone? It's a very prestigious scientific organization. And basically what they say goes. If you disagree with them, you're wrong. And this is what they have to say. In their booklet, published in 1984, they said, listen, folks, in layman's terms, we've given special creation a chance. We've done everything we can to sympathetically consider it. And you know what? It's wrong. In the forms given in the first 2 chapters of Genesis, the theory of special creation is now an invalidated hypothesis. Now just hold on a minute there. Look at what the atheists are saying about what is spoken of in the first 2 chapters of Genesis. In their model, the first 2 chapters of Genesis describes a special creation, not some long geologic evolutionary process. So if you believe in the first 2 chapters of Genesis, you've got to believe in a special creation. That's even the National Academy of Sciences even would agree with that. But the point here, of course, is that they say that special creation is an invalidated hypothesis. In other words, scientifically, it's not true. But we would like to present evidence tonight that would show that it is true.
You know, David, as you say, they've had fantastic influence here in America over the last several decades because their National Academy of Sciences is composed of the leading scientists here in America and even around the world. So when they speak, then of course, you know, vast numbers of people, laymen and so forth, take it as gospel truth. And they're basically putting out the word, as you have just said, that the Bible is wrong. Now, they're not saying that God doesn't exist, but that's what's implying. They're basically saying God is a liar when they say that Genesis has been invalidated by professional people, by people who really know what's going on. In other words, the rest of us people, you know, supposedly don't know as much as they do. We just don't know. But if you really knew all the truth that they know, all the science they know, supposedly you would believe like that. Well, David and I have some other things to say about that. We say, however, that God does not intend, this is David and I talking tonight, God does not intend that the Bible record of the literal Genesis 6-day creation and the seventh-day Sabbath rest to lapse into obscurity and ridicule without providing scientific evidence that affirms these records. In other words, we're taking big-time exception with what the National Academy of Sciences says. We're doing it not only from the Bible, we're going to do it from the standpoint of science and show it's exactly the opposite of what they've been saying for all these years. We also say the Lord has allowed us, David and I, to discover the evidence, this evidence that overturns what the National Academy of Sciences is saying. We're saying that God has allowed us to discover evidence that affirms literally what the Bible says in Genesis, Fourth Commandment, and all parts of the Bible that relate to creation. The Lord has allowed us to discover this evidence of all places, and it's embedded in the granites, God's Genesis rocks. Well, there it is. The evidence is embedded there, and we're going to find out what this evidence is here as we continue. Years ago, as I spoke at the University of Tennessee, I wrote a letter to the then president of the National Academy of Sciences. And basically what I was saying to him is, I'm offering therefore you, whoever you may choose, to send in your stead an opportunity for refuting the evidence for creation published in my scientific reports and summarized in my book. I'll refer specifically to when that was said sometime later. But he is president. At that time, he was president of the National Academy of Sciences. And before I spoke at the University of Tennessee, I wrote him a letter. And I said, you know, I don't believe what you're saying is true in the National Academy of Sciences booklet we just spoke about. You said Genesis has been invalidated. But I'm going to present evidence that night at the University of Tennessee to overturn what you say and to show that indeed there is scientific evidence for creation. And I said, I'm inviting you to come. If you think you have anyone in the staff of the National Academy of Sciences to come and overturn or refute this evidence I'm going to present, which has been widely published, you should come, or you should send some people. Well, he didn't come, but he wrote this letter. He wrote a letter to me afterward. And that's interesting in itself. Press's answer, his answer that night, your work on radiohalos is a matter of record in journals and can be debated by scientists. That's the way science works. I cannot agree with your contention that one small piece of data invalidates the vast body of evidence from geology, astronomy, biology, radio dating, the fossil record, genetics, and other fields that, taken together, irrefutably show the age of the Earth is about 4.5 billion years. Let's get the background here. See, Frank Press, eminent scientist, president of the National Academy of Sciences. I had been publishing for years evidence for creation, and everybody had been ignoring it. I was then going to speak at the University of Tennessee, and I wrote him this very, very straightforward letter, and I said, you think you got it all made? And I said, we're going to overturn everything you're saying, and we're going to do it tonight at the University of Tennessee. And see what he says? He says, we cannot agree that your condition, one small piece of data invalidates everything, geology, astronomy, biology, radio dating. That's exactly what David and I intend to do tonight.
Well, it's interesting that he says that he at least admits that, you know, there is one small piece of data out there that doesn't really fit his picture. So when you really read what he writes carefully, you can see that he does admit, hey, you do have some data here that invalidates. He doesn't see how it invalidates it, but he does at least see that it's on the other side of the equation. So let's look at the details.
Well, as we continue, that's something special we're talking about is, guess where? It's in granite rock. which is what is made of. El Capitan is made of granite. This is a piece of granite rock. Something special is found in the black mica specks in granite rock, not only in El Capitan, but in granite rocks all over the world. When Frank Press talked about the small piece of data, he didn't bring out the fact that indeed it's all over the world. He sort of hid that in that letter. But anyway, David, there's that granite rock, and it's got some pieces of little black mineral mica in it. And we're going to look now under the microscope, and we're going to see rings. A center, you can see a dark center there. If you look carefully, I'll try to isolate it there on the screen. And there indeed we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rings. Where in the world did they all come from? This was taken through a microscope, so of course it's very, very small. And so, David, this is a cross-section now. Tell us what we're looking at.
Well, you have to understand that the granite rock that you saw in just a few slides ago, what you actually do is you find crystals of the larger crystals of the black specks in the granite actually exist in certain locations, making it very easy to make thin sections from those crystals, and then those you can analyze under the microscope through a light transmission microscope. And in the process of doing that, you do see these, after a bit of looking, some concentric circles, which actually are three-dimensional objects, spheres, concentric spheres, which when you slice them through cross-section appear as rings when you look at them in the 2 dimensions. And what it means is that there's a tiny radio center that was radioactive and emits through nuclear decay alpha particles, and with each successive alpha decay through various steps toward stability, you have one more ring being formed as the literally millions of alpha particles are being showered out in 3 dimensions from this radio center. And as the alpha particles go out, they actually discolor the biotite or the mica matrix so that a record is left in the granite. Now, there are certain rules that you have to be aware of in order to have halo formation occur. One of those is that the rock needs to be in a cooled state. In other words, it can't be hot, certainly can't be molten, can't be cooling slowly over millions of years in a hot molten state. If you had it that way, the halos would never form. So you need the rock to be in a very cooled state and, in a sense, able to capture the radioactive decay. So this is a schematic showing which alpha energies correspond to each ring that we saw in the picture there.
David,
this particular one is from the uranium-238 isotope.
It's not important that you actually understand all the actual ins and outs of those ring structures there, but what we want to do now is to go to the next one and say that indeed this is the alpha decay chain of uranium, and it's all those particles being emitted and all the daughter products there. And we don't need to go into all the details, we just want to show you that's the alpha decay chain of uranium. But then, I want to go back there just a minute. You notice that indeed at the last part of that decay chain is polonium, 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 polonium. Now that polonium in the uranium decay chain would be called secondary because it's a derivative, a daughter of the original uranium nucleus. But now also, what would happen, for example, if instead of starting at the uranium, we start now with polonium, and polonium-218 to 214 to 210, and then lead. This is important because we're going to find that indeed this idea of primordial polonium, our monitor up here went out on us, so we'll have to look up on the screen, it appears, unless there's some quick fix for the monitor.
This is from the isotope polonium-210.
That's the isotope.
As you can imagine, the polonium-210 isotope just has one alpha particle, hence you just have one ring. Now, the proponents of the people that don't believe, well, actually, we should talk more. Let's just keep talking here about what the polonium halos mean in terms of creation.
Our monitor has come back, David.
The whole idea, That's okay. The whole idea is that